Hello everyone, and welcome back to my watercolor lettering basics series here on my blog and YouTube channel. This is part 3, where we're actually diving into using a brush and creating a basic alphabet with our watercolors. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go back and watch the first 2 videos in this series where I'm covering materials, everything from watercolors, the different types, brushes, paper, and the other things you'll need to begin practicing. So let's go ahead and start talking about how to use a paintbrush for lettering with watercolors. The first thing I want to mention though is that I'm not really teaching about watercolors necessarily in this video. This is more about how to use the brush for lettering. So whatever kind of watercolors you get, you really need to play around with them, and you need to experiment with how much water to add and when you'll need to refill your brush with water. Just kind of get to know your brush and get to know your watercolors. And a great way to do that is with what I'm doing right now. And this is just sort of playing around and experimenting and, like I said, getting to know the brush and the watercolors. And I encourage you to do this before you begin anything. So use your brush with a lot of pressure and use your brush with no pressure, and see how long you can stretch your pigment before you have to refill, so that you can just kind of get to know how everything works and you'll be a lot more comfortable with it. So I encourage you to make different shapes. Don't worry about creating anything perfect. Just mess around with it and fill up a whole couple pages with just different little doodles and things that you're doing to get comfortable with the brush. Like I talked about in the previous video talking about different kinds of brushes, the thing that you want to look out for is a round brush, and it has a tapered end just like the one I'm using. So let's go ahead and start talking about making upstrokes and downstrokes. So in lettering, you have upstrokes, which are really thin, and you have downstrokes, which are thick. Right now I'm making upstrokes, and that means that my brush is going in an upward motion, and I'm just barely touching the paper with the tip of the brush and not applying any pressure on that brush whatsoever. Therefore, the brush really isn't bending at all. So you can watch me create the downstrokes here in just a second to see the difference in what the brush actually looks like when I'm making those downstrokes. So as you can see, the downstrokes cause my brush to bend, and I'm almost using like the entire side of it. And this is what creates those thick lines in lettering that make your lettering look really neat and make it kind of look like calligraphy. A lot of you all are already lettering, and you've probably mastered the brush pen, so you know about upstrokes and downstrokes. But I think it's really important to practice with the paintbrush a lot, because a paintbrush is a lot of times more flexible than a brush pen will be, so it takes a little more patience and practice to get those perfect up and down strokes. Another excellent stroke to practice is an arch. And the arch helps you get familiar with transitioning from up to downstroke. So as you can see, the arch pointing upward has you to do the thin upstrokes going up and then having to immediately transition into a thick downstroke. And this is really the key part of lettering, is all about that transition and knowing when and where to do what, the thin stroke or the thick downstroke. So this is an excellent exercise that will especially get you acquainted with creating the basic alphabet. Going along with that same idea, you can also create a really long string of these arches going in both directions, which will help you greatly with script lettering, where in theory you're supposed to not really pick up your pen, but in this case we're using a paintbrush. So obviously to refill color or to wipe your brush with water, you'll have to pick it up, but this will still really help you. Now I'm just switching to a smaller paintbrush, and so if you recall from last week's video when we learned about paintbrushes, a smaller paintbrush is going to give me smaller lines in general. So I'm going to get thinner upstrokes and even thinner downstrokes because the brush itself is smaller. And this is just a little squiggle exercise that I think helps me with creating O's and other circular letters, so I think it's really important to do that as well. And lastly, this little shape has no rhyme or reason to it other than I think it's just really important to sit down with your paintbrush and to just make shapes and do doodles and crazy lines that make no sense and are totally unpredictable, just so you can practice getting the brush dynamics down and practice where those upstrokes and downstrokes should go. Once you have filled up pages upon pages with your stroke exercises and you're feeling a little bit more confident and comfortable with your paintbrush and your watercolors, I want you to grab a pencil and start writing a just print alphabet on a sheet of watercolor paper. And it isn't until just now, as I'm doing this voiceover, that I see I totally forgot the letter J, so make sure to include yours. But this is just the first step in getting started with watercolor lettering and actually putting the practice to actual letters. So after I complete this alphabet, I'm just going to do a couple of common letter combinations that come up in words such as two M's or two S's or an ST or an SH, just things like that. This will already start helping you with connecting letters with your paintbrush. Now let's grab our paintbrush. I'm using this size 10 round brush, pretty much the same one I've been using the whole time, and I'm just going to pick a pretty color and start tracing over this alphabet. So for those of you who are not very familiar with lettering, it's very simple, the dynamics of lettering. Every time your paintbrush moves downward, you're going to apply pressure so that your paintbrush bends and you get the thick downstroke. And every time your paintbrush moves up, you want to have a very thin upstroke, just like we were practicing in those practice strokes. So I left this video in real time. I don't think there's any part of this video that is sped up, because I wanted you to see that I am going pretty slowly and taking my time. And that's really the key when you're getting started in lettering. When I teach workshops, oh my gosh, people absolutely fly. And I really wish I could just grab people and literally hold their arms while they're lettering for the very first time, because it is not a sprint, it's very much a marathon, so you need to go slow. And I know I might still be going just a little bit faster than you will want to go as a total beginner. So if you're still feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or if you feel like, oh my gosh, I still don't really know about this upstroke downstroke thing, an exercise that I always do with my in-person students is we write out the alphabet in pencil on just any sheet of paper you can find, and then we go back through and we circle everywhere where the pencil in our hand had to move downward. And looking at all of the circles and looking at the circles in every single letter, you can then visualize, okay, this is how often I'm going to need to transition from that up to downstroke. You can kind of have a key to look at while you're tracing over your letters, and you can see this is where I need to move downward and apply a lot of pressure, and this is where I need to move upward. And if you have to watch this video of me lettering a million times, then you just have to do it. It's all about learning. Don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. And also, I have a ton of blog posts that talk about upstrokes and downstrokes, so I will include those in the blog post that comes with this video so you can feel a little bit more confident. And even though I encourage you to go ahead and start practicing with some of these common letter combinations, please do not feel pressured if you're not ready and you need to just work on that basic alphabet. I just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there if you're feeling froggy, because this is like a major crash course to watercolor lettering, and I want everyone to feel like they have something to work on, and I want everyone to feel happy and confident and included. In next week's video is when we are going to talk about script lettering and making connections between letters and all of that good stuff. So for this week, I want your homework to be filling up a couple pages with your stroke practice and getting really comfortable with your brush and your watercolors, and then fill up another couple pages with some just simple alphabets, and you can even get a little fancy and go ahead and start trying script lettering if you're feeling into it. I just always love to like jump ahead because I'm super impatient. So, but I have confidence in you all. You're gonna knock it out of the water. And just like every week, there is a blog post that goes with this video that details even more about lettering. And once again, you'll find some helpful links if you're feeling a little bit lost. And if you have any questions, you can also find me through my contact page on my website, which is linked below. So I can't wait to see you guys next week when we talk about script lettering and some fun basic blending techniques. So I'll see you then. Bye.